Okay, so how to get started. What tools do you guys need when you are starting your foundation paper piecing? And I'm going to go over kind of a little bit of the setup of like how I have my sewing machine and desk set up. So let me show you real quick. Okay, so you can see I have my sewing machine, I have scissors, I have pins, my fabric's hiding back there. I've got my scrap bin. These are sections that have already been done. These are sections that need to be done. And then I've got my mini iron and ironing board here. And then on this side, you can see I have my cutting table and my ruler and my rotary blade. I also have a spinning mat right there. And you can just put your pieces on and then rotate it as you're cutting. So simple setup, nothing crazy. And one of the other things you will obviously need is a computer or a device that you can download patterns from. Most patterns these days for foundation paper piecing are PDF files. So you'll just simply download it to your computer. A lot of them are instant downloads. Once you have it downloaded to your computer, then you can go ahead and look through the entire pattern. Most of my patterns have multiple sizes, meaning you're not just getting a 12-inch block. You're going to get a 10, a 12, a 15, an 18, and a 20-inch block. You can choose your size basically. And if those aren't the size you want, you can always use the print setting and go from 100% to 50% or 60% or 75% and just print the actual PDF file in the size you want. Just don't forget that your 1/4 inch seam allowance will shrink as well. So make sure to either remark that with like a red pen or some type of really bright color, so that way you know not to cut on the dotted line, but to cut on your recolored 1/4 inch seam. The other thing you will need is a printer of some sort, so that you can print the PDF. I just have a simple, laser printer, whatever, no big deal, nothing fancy. You can get one with a scanner, so that way you can always scan patterns. I know some patterns are paper, actual physical paper, so you could always scan those in and then have them in your computer for later use. You can scan them and copy them to make multiple pattern pieces, so that way you can make the block several times. So having a scanner is handy, but not required. Especially with my patterns, mine are all PDF, so you'll just simply print them out and you'll have it on your computer, so you can always reprint or print it multiple times. So the last thing you will need to get started with the foundation paper piecing pattern is you will need fabric and you will need thread. This is a choice that you can decide on when you are sewing and learning, whether you use light thread or dark thread or coordinating thread. That is up to you. I typically stick with a white if most of my fabric is light colored. I stick with a black if most of my fabric color is dark. And you're using a shorter stitch length than you normally do. So normal everyday stitching, I'm using a 3 on my machine. This may be different on your machine, so keep that in mind. And when I'm doing my foundation paper piecing, I'm usually stitching at about a 2 or like a 1.8. The small stitching is what's going to help puncture through the paper, but also keep the fabric together. And then when you're pulling that paper off, that small stitch length is going to, keep from pulling the seam apart. So having that small little tiny seam or stitch length is important. So you'll definitely need to play around with your stitch length. Probably get a piece of paper, throw some fabric on top, and then, stitch, and then try pulling the paper off and see what works best for your machine, because every machine is different.